With Israel's regathering as a nation state, the retaking of Jerusalem as the holy city, with all of that, there are now interests in the temple's redevelopment. Behind me is the Eastern Gate, or the old Eastern Gate. It's the old city of Jerusalem, a fascinating spot. Proximate to it is a cemetery, and I'm standing in a cemetery right now, and I'm excited to do so. Most people would think that's very exciting. This is an Arab Muslim cemetery adjacent to the Eastern Gate. And adjacent to this cemetery, this Muslim cemetery, is a Jewish cemetery that carpets a good section of the Mount of Olives. Now, when I tell you I'm excited to come to you from this place, that sounds, a bit out of place for a cemetery, but those that are buried here are excited to be at this place for comparable reasons. They're getting box office seats to the greatest show on earth in the Messianic era. I mention that because certainly, and I speak more to Jewish senses and sensibilities, there's an anticipation of a resurrection to come. And not only is there an anticipation of a resurrection to come, and thus individuals want to be buried close to the holy city, in the holy city to come is, per the understanding of religious Jews, for reasons that we'll explore, comes the emergence of a temple complex. We know that Solomon built a temple. It was destroyed. Exiles returned, and Herod refurbished the temple. That was the temple in Jesus' day. Eventually that was felled. It was destroyed. But there's an understanding in biblical literature, both in the Newer Testament and the Older Testament, that there's another temple to come. And individuals believe, of course, there's only one place for it to be, and that's behind me here at the temple complex. I want to explore a text in a second that gives voice to the priests that'll be officiating in that temple to come. But at the outset, what I want to do is overcome an objection that many evangelicals have with the notion of a rebuilt temple and a priesthood that is then redeveloped in the temple. It's adjudged to be superfluous in that Jesus Christ died for our sins and is the high priest and sacrifice. Some allege that this is all delusional. It's fantasy because there's no need, because Jesus is the priest and the sacrifice. There's no need for a temple. There's no need for a priesthood. There's no need for a sacrifice.
Historically, sacrifice has always been an integral part of atonement, both in the Wilderness Tabernacle and the ensuing Jerusalem temples. David Parsons gives his perspective on the Third Temple.
Some say, well, look, Jesus is our eternal sacrifice. There's no need for the sacrifice of animals there. And that's all good and fine. And there are a lot of Jews who want to rebuild the temple. They're not so interested in the animal sacrifices or whatever, but recapturing that sort of glory that was there. Some say we shouldn't be involved in it because it's just going to be defiled by the Antichrist. And you can actually find 3 places in the book of Daniel where he talks about an abomination of desolation, and each is a separate one. The fact that even Daniel prophesies all 3 of them, it was never a reason not to rebuild the temple. They rebuilt it the first time and such, so I don't think that's necessarily a reason not to rebuild it. If you don't want to be involved, you don't have to. It will be a very sensitive issue.
Biblical authors in both the Older and the Newer Testament give voice to a coming new temple. With Israel's regathering as a nation state, with the retaking of Jerusalem as the holy city, with all of that, there are now interests in the temple's redevelopment. And of course, in this series, we're exploring, in order to rededicate a rededicated temple, you need to have the ashes of red heifer, and even those have been found in Texas.